We've talked on this channel multiple times about Black Lives Matter and the defund the police movement. It has support across the Democratic Party, despite Biden recently admitting in a leaked audio clip that it damaged his campaign. Pandering to BLM, they enabled their demands, and across the nation, left-leaning councils begun to float the idea of dismantling the police. This led to crime surges across the country, often impacting the lower income areas with high minority demographics more than it has others. And apparently, this is all being done under the guise of improving black lives. Well, today, Minneapolis, the epicenter of the defund the police movement, embarrassed themselves in front of the whole nation. While they cowardly gave in to the demands of a Marxist organization, they abandoned their duty to the Americans that they claim to represent. That's what we're talking about today on the channel. Welcome to our video if this is the first time you have seen any of our content, and if you are a returning viewer, welcome also, and thank you for subscribing. If you haven't already subscribed and you do enjoy the content, then please do consider doing so. Give us a like and drop us a comment down below. So we're going to take a look at this article from Fox News to begin. Connor.
Absolutely. So, as you say, Fox News, our good friends, Minneapolis lawmakers distanced themselves from defund the police movement after $8 million budget cuts. Now, could this have anything to do with the fact that this has backfired spectacularly and taking $8 million out of the police force is a bad idea? Well, who knows? We'll find out. Two Minneapolis City Council members are denying their involvement with the defund the police movement just days after the council approved a budget that shifted approximately $8 million from the police department, and months after they joined colleagues in calling for the dismantlement of Minnesota City's department. City Council member Steve Fletcher rejected the idea that the council's goal was to defund the police during a recent interview with local news station KSTP TV, and instead said the budget cuts came as a result of the need to fund other programs. Defund is not the framework the council has ever chosen, Fletcher said during the interview that aired this week. He was seated next to council member Philippe Cunningham, who agreed. Now remember, Fletcher and Cunningham were two of the 9 city council members who attended an event in June where they stood behind a sign that stated defund police and said they would dismantle the police department just weeks after the death of George Floyd. Now, this is just really a case of Democrats pushing the defunding of the police. Listen, it's trending on Twitter. All the progressives got behind it. There are people in the streets. And instead of, taking a sensible and reasonable policy precaution and looking at the entire picture and saying, no, it's a bad idea, they listen to these Twitter Antifa psychos over their own citizens. And now when it comes to taking responsibility with massive spikes in crime, they are scarpering and denied it ever happened. Ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
It is, and it's a growing trend that we're seeing that the angry mob, whether that's the physical angry mob that's burning down buildings in the cities, or the more metaphorical mob on Twitter, despite not representing anywhere near a majority of Americans or even a sort of consensus of ideas, they seem to have so much sway and influence over public officials, elected officials, and what they do. These two despicable individuals, really, and that is the word for them, these council members, Fletcher and Cunningham, pandered and appeased to this group because they were afraid for the political optics of if they went against them. And then when the sort of disastrous policy that they enabled started to come to fruition, they suddenly backpedal and say, no, we never had anything to do with that. You see it, right across the Democratic Party. They're now sort of lamenting over how the defund the police movement absolutely gave them a kicking in the polls when it came to, election night, and they lost seats up and down the country, obviously in Congress, and didn't do anywhere near as well as they thought they would in the Senate. They were talking about taking seats like, Lindsey Graham, and then he obviously goes on and wins by 10 points. They were talking about taking Texas, and it's still, again, they're off it by like 10 points. So they were way off the mark, and obviously then that kickstarted this battle between the progressives and the moderates. But I think it's just actually quite despicable. hate this pandering, and they're just abandoning and letting down the people that they're supposed to represent and the people that they're supposed to protect.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's one part pandering, isn't it? And it's another part intimidation, because this is what happens whenever you let any progressive set the agenda. Because when at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, if you want to call it that, I call them riots, but whatever. Um, can you imagine being the elected politician and speaking out and actively criticizing it? If you remember, there had to be a whole process. There had to be bit by bit, inch by inch, stepping a little bit closer to criticizing it. Because
Mm.
anybody who came out against it was instantly labeled a racist. There are people who criticize Black Lives Matter, and these mental psychopaths called up their employers and demanded that they get fired and things like this. It was very hard to criticize them. And this is what they do. They suck all the air needed for open debate, for free debate, and they just replace it with this progressive shoutingness. And guess what? They're wrong. They're almost always wrong because they're insane. And yeah, if you defund the police department, you're not helping minorities out, because when they go home to their nice apartment in the suburbs or whatever, and they don't have to feel the effects of increased crime, but those inner city suburbs where black people live, where minorities live, who do rely on the police to protect their communities, guess what? It's them who suffers the most. So this is really, I mean, I guess I feel a hint of sympathy for Fletcher and Cunningham, but
Yeah.
if you're elected as a public leader, you should lead. Damn it!
Yeah, absolutely. You're right when you say, the intimidation as well. Certainly, it. What happens, obviously, as you say, they're afraid to say anything. They're afraid to speak out because it's like a political If you're a left-leaning politician, if you're a Democratic Party member, and you go against the narrative that's coming out from the mob, then it's political suicide. You're going to lose your career. That's it. And like you say, what it does is it just then completely drowns out any sensible sort of discussion or discourse on the matter. People aren't allowed to come out and say, oh, no, hold on, maybe this is a bit insane. Because something that was popular was to reform the police. And I think most people basically support that. They always support this idea of, yeah, we can certainly improve the way that the police do their business. And there's a bunch of sensible ideas, like things like mandatory what do they call them? Cameras and stuff that they wear on their uniform. And that's a perfectly sensible idea that I think most people can get behind. Instead of going for that, though, they go for these ludicrous ideas of defunding the police, and the consequence has been disastrous. I mean, just in Minneapolis, I've got this figure from the AP News. It says police have recorded 532 gunshot victims this year as of last Thursday, more than double the same period a year ago. Carjackings have also spiked to 375 so far this year, 331% from the same period as last year. And violent crimes have topped 5,100 compared to 4,000 for the same period in 2009. And the budget cut has only come in now, today. They've only approved it today. But the damage from the rhetoric has already happened because, police officers have been leaving the force en masse. They see the writing on the wall. They know what's going to happen. It's only a matter of time until they're just doing their job and suddenly they become the fall guy, the scapegoat, because someone gets hurt, while they're committing a crime, essentially.
Absolutely, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? How this movement ever was treated seriously. I think it's a real lesson for the history books. When we're looking back on this, we're going to have to learn, and we're going to have to see exactly what has happened with this and address it in kind, because we cannot have a situation where a very, very tiny minority of the population is shouting louder than everybody else, and anybody who criticizes them is just completely taken out of the picture with such disastrous consequences. Because those numbers you were saying there, Ian, they horrified me. Imagine 250 people. That's what, like, a school full of people.
Yeah.
250 people gunshot wounds. That's a school full of people who are lying in hospital this Christmas. Okay, that's 250 people with, let's say, an average of 4 members of their family each, heartbroken this Christmas. And it's all because way back in March, some, fat lesbian Antifa
You're gonna get
Twitter
cancelled for that, man.
psychopath. I'm going to get super cancelled for that. Sipping on her Starbucks soy latte, decided to destroy the police force. It's utterly ludicrous. But I think we'll leave it there before I say something else that gets me cancelled. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Please do subscribe if you haven't already. Do like the video. That helps us out with the algorithm. And do leave us a comment because that also helps out. And we just like to hear from you anyway. Also, do check out our friends at freedomfirstpress.com. We'll leave a link in the description. Thanks very much. Stay safe and Merry Christmas.